Though the chip shortage has somewhat hampered the progress of current-gen consoles, the PlayStation 5 generation is now in full swing and boasts a solid library of story-rich games. There is still plenty of time left on the console's shelf life to see new and exciting entries, and what's already there spans an impressive range of genres and franchises. Plenty of PS4 games have been enhanced to take full advantage of everything the PS5 has to offer, and loads of Last Me Master podcasts. If the PlayStation 5 games has to offer, this is especially true when considering Sony's blockbuster first-party releases and cross-platform hits. Insomniac Games' Spider-Man 2 is the latest acclaimed PS5 exclusive, while the third-party CD Projekt Red title, Cyberpunk 2077, has finally fulfilled its potential in the current generation. In a massive sea of games, gamers are sure to wonder which ones are worth their time. The God of War soft reboot from 2018 was one of the most acclaimed titles from the PS4 console generation, and Santa Monica Studios' Ragnarok was a worthy sequel. Directly depending on the events of its predecessor, the game follows Kratos and Atreus in the Scandinavian winter as they cope with the consequences of Baldur's death. And while the new God of War games are drastically different from the original trilogy, wreaking havoc with Kratos never gets old, Ragnarok shows Santa Monica Studio continuing the reinvention seen in its predecessor, adopting an intimately cinematic storytelling style that matches God of War's newfound over-the-shoulder combat. It's a worthwhile approach as it tells an inventive and sprawling Norse-inspired odyssey that closes this two-game story arc to dramatic effect. The father-son bond between Kratos and Atreus is beautifully emotional, and the breathtaking visuals only add to it. The CRPG subgenre has been making something of a comeback in recent years, but Larian Studios' Baldur's Gate 3 smashed all expectations. Players assume the role of their curated character, or one of Baldur's Gate 3's terrific origin characters, as they embark on a grand quest to discover the mystery behind a mind flayer invasion and the parasite they've been infected with. Different to the other parasites they've been infected with every act, Baldur's Gate 3 is a triumph in role-playing and storytelling, bringing the most accessible version of the Dungeons & Dragons experience without sacrificing depth. Thanks to the customization, the richness of the explorable locales, and compelling party members, this game will satisfy fantasy buffs craving a world with deep world building and thoughtful writing. There are so many different paths, NPCs, and conversations to be had that very few BG3 playthroughs are ever the same. Originally one of the PS4's swansong titles, Sucker Punch Productions' Ghost of Tsushima was a triumphant return for the studio in gaming since 2014's infamous First Light. Beginning in 1274 Japan, the samurai Jin Sakai must decide whether to honor his warrior's code or discard it to save his land from a Mongol invasion. Similar to Guerrilla Studios with the Horizon series, Ghost of Tsushima shows Sucker Punch's impressive versatility, demonstrating the team has the creative skills to pen a terrific modern-day Akira Kurosawa movie. The game's plot is well acted and brilliantly framed thanks to its mesmerizing open world. It's bolstered by gameplay mechanics that make the players feel like they're choreographing a samurai film epic. There's no shortage of Japanese-centric games, but Ghost of Tsushima hits it out of the park with its storytelling and impressive environments. The latest PS5 success story, Insomniac Games' Marvel's Spider-Man 2, continues to explore this invigorating canon for the wallcrawler. Now, with Peter Parker and Miles Morales as Spider-Man, the heroes face an onslaught of villains, including Lizard, Venom, and Kraven, with the latter attempting to hunt them down to find prey worthy of his skills. The bringing together of Peter Parker and Miles Morales could only have been made better if the game were co-op compatible. Taking a page from the milestone comic Kraven's Last Hunt by J.M. DeMatteis and Mike Zeck, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is a satisfying, tense, and inspired emotional journey for the game's dual protagonists. Maintaining an impressive balance, the main story and side adventures showcase Peter's and Miles' best characteristics. Spider-Man 2 is amazing enough that even those who have no care for Marvel's gimmicks will find deep satisfaction in this game. Cyberpunk 2077 has come a long way since its disastrous launch in 2020 thanks to CD Projekt Red's post-launch support. Non-stop updates and patches have finally cemented Cyberpunk 2077 as the great game it was always promised to be. Set in a futuristic sci-fi dystopia, players assume the role of a mercenary dealing with the aftermath of a heist gone haywire, and as an action RPG, Cyberpunk 2077 has now fully come into its own, mechanically, technically, and even in terms of storytelling thanks to extensive updates and the recent DLC expansion. Players can explore a cyberpunk dystopia with compelling side quests and a gritty mainline story. Better still is the Phantom Liberty expansion, growing Night City's scope with a new area, intriguing characters, and an exciting spy thriller plot. Few stories compared to the ones told in Cyberpunk 2077, and every gamer will soon forget the sad place it started in. Square Enix's Final Fantasy VI-E is the franchise's latest reinvention, putting a dark fantasy and action RPG spin on its formula. The game revolves around Clive Rosfield as he struggles in a world suffering from a blight draining the land's magical resources and the grim secret behind the Icon beasts he hosts. Complemented by exhilarating combat, stunning boss fights, and fantastic voice acting, Final Fantasy VI-E adopts a George R.R. Martin-like approach to storytelling. An investing cast and immersive world building lead to a branching and dramatic plot that's effectively anime Game of Thrones in the most affectionate way. FXVI's DLC expansions, Echoes of the Fallen and The Rising Tide, flesh out this fascinating fantasy world and offer some challenging new combat sequences. Final Fantasy XVI is an excellent place for new players of the franchise to hop right in, be able to Developer studio Housemarque is one of the more recent PlayStation acquisitions, and the team's first major project under the publisher is the sci-fi roguelike game Returnal. The game follows a renegade astronaut named Celine Vassos landing on the ominous planet Atropos to trace a strangely familiar signal dubbed the White Signal, which leads to her being caught in a time loop. One of the first PS5 exclusive games, Returnal makes full use of the new-gen console's abilities. Returnal is one of the most inventive recent PlayStation console exclusives, mixing challenging and fast-paced third-person shooting with enticing storytelling. The roguelike gameplay perfectly weaves into the story's theme of being trapped in a time loop, and it's a great plot device for unraveling Celine's mysterious connection to the White Signal. New players should proceed with caution, however, as Returnal is brutally difficult and painfully punishing. While the studio is now best known for its beloved Spider-Man series, Insomniac Games' Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is a welcome return to the developer's roots. The iconic PlayStation duo needs to fight off the evil Emperor Nefarious after Ratchet accidentally opens up a rift across dimensions. Ratchet and Clank started back in the early 2000s, making Rift Apart the perfect game for any adult's yearning nostalgia. But the two young and port-freak instructors put in the effort to create. Though there are plenty of gripping, dramatic stories now in the AAA gaming scene, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is a reminder of how good a light-hearted, colourful story starring mascot characters can still be. Besides engaging new characters like Rivet, Rift Apart is a tasteful mix of vibrant and comedic atmosphere with heartfelt storytelling. It's a nice break from the overtly gritty and dark games that are more commonplace these days. Remedy Entertainment's Alan Wake 2 has proven to be a worthy successor. The game follows the titular protagonist as he tries to escape from an alternate dimension by writing a horror story led by an FBI agent named Saga Anderson. While gamers who often shy away from the horror genre might not think Alan Wake is for them, they'll be surprised to find that the deep story makes up for its spooky happenings. The original Alan Wake succeeded as a Stephen King-inspired psychological thriller, and this sequel elevates that formula to become a convincing survival horror experience. It retains the cerebral roots of its predecessor, and Alan Wake 2 is an even more ambitious story thanks to its subversive plot and clever use of the dual protagonist approach. Any fan of horror looking for an enriching story paired with neat gameplay will be more than pleased with what Alan Wake 2 has to offer. From Alan Wake developers Remedy Entertainment, Control is an exciting paranormal-themed thriller and action-adventure game. The story focuses on the Federal Bureau of Control's new director, Jesse Faden, as she investigates its paranormal headquarters to quell a mysterious, otherworldly enemy invading reality. The game makes sure to keep its cards close, as players will only begin to understand the story as Jessie begins to understand it by herself. The Control Ultimate Edition is available on PS5 as the complete package for this experience, bundling the Foundation and RWE DLC expansions. Jesse Faden is an interesting protagonist in an even more intriguing world, blending elements of TV shows like Twin Peaks and The X-Files to tell an inspired and riveting sci-fi mystery thriller. The combat is incredibly creative as it blends perfectly with the world and story, and CD Projekt Red's The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt helped make the franchise popular worldwide and still stands as the Polish developer's best game. This dark fantasy epic sends monster hunter Geralt of Rivia across the continent to rescue his surrogate daughter and stop a prophetic apocalypse. The complete edition is the current-gen port of the acclaimed game, and the mechanical tweaks to combat, graphical upgrades, and mod integration make this the definitive way to play The Witcher 3. But honestly, the game is a respectful adaptation of author Andrzej Sapkowski's world. Thanks to a sweeping main questline, diverse characters, equally compelling DLC stories, and many excellent side quests that add to the world building, the complete edition ensures the game remains one of the best in the modern era, and open-world games generally. The Witcher 3 is one of the best RPGs ever made, and the enhanced visuals and gameplay offered on the PS5 only add to the game's engaging plot. The sequel to 2019's A Plague Tale, Innocence, developer Asobo Studios' Requiem delivers another powerful story. The first game does an amazing job of world building and fleshing out the characters, while the second game has the room to take things much further. Set 6 months after the events of Innocence, siblings Amicia and Hugo de Rune continue their desperate journey to find a cure to the latter's blood-based disease. A Plague Tale Requiem will surely please fans heavily invested in the first entry's narrative, as this sequel doubles down on the high emotional stakes. Both titles are some of the most compelling story-driven games in recent years, holding little back in the story's consequences and persistent tension, whether it's evading dangerous inquisitors or disease-ridden rats. Plague Tale also provides a very unique gameplay loop that centers around the player having to be mindful of Hugo at almost all times. Microsoft's Persona 5 helped catapult the beloved JRPG series to international stardom, and Persona 3 Reload is a well-deserved remake of the P2 classic. If there's one thing that's true about the Persona series, it's that the games hardly ever miss in the eyes of players. The plot follows the quest of a high school student with the ability to summon spiritual personas, join a group of like-minded people, defeat the sinister shadows, and unravel the mystery surrounding the ominous Dark Hour. Persona 3 Reload is an excellent remake of the PS2 original, even though it cuts the female protagonist and her content from the PSP port. If Persona 5 is the most beloved among new Persona fans, the third installment reigns as the favorite among more seasoned Idlers lovers. The turn-based combat is briskly paced and welcomes longtime fans and newcomers alike, while the new social sim mechanics help complement the wider narrative. As with the wait between Diablo 2 and 3, 4 was a long time coming but earned much praise when it launched. Set 50 years after its predecessor's final DLC expansion, the protagonist is caught in a struggle caused by a cult summoning the demon Lilith to take over the world of Sanctuary. Many of its predecessor's strengths carry over to and are expanded upon in Diablo 4, and Tin Candace ended up contacting Lilith for revenge and delivering her a letter written by Lilith. Diablo 4's unique classes offer exciting ways to approach character builds and combat, and the new open-world formula is substantive enough to justify the scope. The action RPG also features a compelling dark fantasy narrative bolstered by its gritty, open-world setting. It maintains a moody atmosphere and dramatic intrigue, partly thanks to its return to a more grounded art direction. Not only is Diablo 4 one of the best stories on the PS5, but it's also an enriching multiplayer experience for friends to venture together. Historically, Capcom's original Resident Evil 4 has a special place in the medium as one of the best games. It became one of the most influential for how it envisioned third-person action in games. 2023's Remake was a tasteful reimagining of the classic story. Combined with slick new controls and enhanced combat mechanics, the Resident Evil 4 Remake is a loving modernization of fan-favorite hero Leon S. Kennedy. His mission to rescue the US president's daughter from a parasitic cult has never been more thrilling. Part of what makes the game's story so beloved is how it embraces its campy blockbuster horror movie atmosphere, including its lovably cheesy protagonist. The Resident Evil 4 Remake arguably improves areas of the original story, like giving Ashley more agency as a character. RG Studios took a huge risk with Like a Dragon, the seventh mainline installment in their Yakuza universe. After over a decade, they switched protagonists from the suave Kazuma Kiryu to the fiery Ichiban Kasuga and shifted the battle system from a beating up to a classic turn-based JRPG. As it turned out, though, fans loved both changes, leading to one of the franchise's most successful installments ever. Ichiban is enjoying his life as a Yakuza when one day he's forced to take the fall for a murder, leaving him locked up in prison for 18 years. When he gets out, he returns to his clan, hoping for a hero's welcome, only to be shot by the very man who made him take the fall. Dumped in the city of Ijincho, Ichiban is left to figure out why he was betrayed and how to put his life back together from nothing. Like a Dragon is one of the best RPGs of the 2010s for how it deftly weaves together a heartwarming story with genuinely fascinating discussions about how a broken system often requires marginalized people to turn to crime. The Judgement franchise was Ryuga Gotoku Studios' spin-off set in the Yakuza universe, allowing them to keep stylish, cool beat ins-em-ups. The second title in the game takes Detective Takayuki Yagami to the city of Ijincho to investigate an impossible murder that the culprit has already confessed to. While in Ijincho, Yagami also spends time investigating at a high school where he gets pulled into the lives of the students there. No longer immersed in the criminal world like the Yakuza series, Lost Judgment is free to delve into harder-hitting subjects like school bullying and corruption. While Yakuza games can often take a while to get going, Lost Judgment hits the ground running. Spinning narrative players will be invested in early. Still, true to form for a game from RGG Studios, there's a ton of side content ranging from separate detective cases to fun mini-games for players to get lost in. Disco Elysium is widely considered one of the greatest RPGs ever made, and it's largely off the strength of its writing. The story follows a detective attempting to solve a murder while also having lost his memory. Investigating the murder offers the hope of regaining his identity, though even if he regains everything, it might be a life he doesn't want to go back to. Disco, there's zero combat, and instead everything is handled by whether the player has the right skills in a given conversation to learn the right information. The result is a game that still allows freedom to customize the protagonist, but without requiring combat from players. Modern Sony is built off the back of Naughty Dog's work on the Uncharted franchise. Nathan Drake's adventures represented a new PlayStation era, one where the characters, plot, and set pieces felt more like classic action films. Nathan Drake Collection invites players to relive the experience of the first three games, following along as Nate turns into a treasure-hunting legend. While their plots might not be revolutionary, it's impossible not to be locked in from start to finish. Developed by Bluepoint, the Legacy of Thieves collection offers some much-needed upgrades to all three titles. They now run in full HD and at 60 frames per second, and Bluepoint offers improved lighting, touched-up cutscenes, and better textures. The result is three games that still look gorgeous, even though they were all original PlayStation 3 titles. The Persona series has become one of the most popular JRPG series for its sense of style, characters, and all-round excellent writing. Persona 5 in particular puts players in the position of a group of high school students known as the Phantom Thieves of Hearts. The Phantom Thieves traverse the metaverse, battling the negative emotions in the hearts of humanity in highly stylized turn-based combat. The royal upgrade of Persona 5 adds a ton of additional content, including a new character, a new palace, and an entirely new semester to play through for the game's social mechanics. Even fans who have already beaten the game once will want to return to spend a bit more time in this world. Whether they're a new or an old fan, though, Persona 5 Royal reminds gamers why Atlas is part of the gold standard for JRPG writing. Being a massive open plush Souls game, gamers might think that Elden Ring's story is lacking in comparison to its boss center gameplay. Elden Ring's story isn't neatly handed to players. All players know from the jump is that they're maidenless and must go on a quest to become the Elden Lord. However, From Software delivers a rich, intertwined story where every piece has its place. As players progress through the lands between, they will have to put this story together like an intricate puzzle with thousands of pieces. While some gamers might prefer a more linear style of storytelling, Elden Ring's story is so great because players can understand the history of the world no matter where they are. Granted, as there is no hand-holding, much of Elden Ring's story lies in item descriptions, environmental details, and cryptic NPCs that players only encounter every once in a while. Still, From Software's dark fantasy epic has one of the best narratives for those who are brave enough to tackle the challenging game. Genshin Impact is a game that is constantly being updated and expanded. As such, players must wait for updates to see more of the game's story come to life. Awakening in a land called Teyvat, the player will choose to play as one of a set of twins, Aether or Lumini. Regardless of who they pick, the player will be called the Traveler. The protagonist has been separated from their twin, and the only thing that drives them deeply is being able to reunite. Across an expansive world, the Traveler finds themselves getting roped into hairy politics and cataclysmic events, all while they follow on the heels of their lost sibling. Since its release, Genshin Impact has added new nations and characters, all of which manage to fit perfectly into a seemingly never-ending tale. For a new player, Genshin might feel like an incredibly overwhelming game to get into, but it's never too hard, and it often places the quality of a good story above all else. New players will have years' worth of content to catch up on, and there's still plenty more on the way. The deck builder genre has led to excellent games, but they might not seem like the best place for an amazing story. However, Inscryption stands out for being highly unique and creative with its gameplay. The atmosphere of the game feels entirely eerie as players wake up to find themselves in a creepy shack. Players are free to stand up from the table and explore the small surrounding area, and players will be able to interact with more of the environment the further they make it through the game. Inscryption delivers a suspenseful, rich tale that blends well with its own mechanics. Deck building remains the core aspect of the game, but Inscryption dives into multiple acts that each feel entirely different from one another. Each act reveals more lore in a manner that is meticulous and well-paced. Even gamers unfamiliar with deck building will find themselves sucked into the world quickly. Sometimes it feels like gameplay was made first and the story to accompany it was made second. However, in some cases it feels like the complete opposite. Gris is one of those games. Taking the role of the titular protagonist, players aim to regain her singing voice as well as shift through her tumultuous emotions. The almost empty-feeling world looks straight out of a coloring book, with the most melancholic soundtrack to pair with it. And for anyone seeking one of the most emotional stories on the PS5, look no further than Gris. The game is short, only requiring a couple of hours to beat, but it manages to convey a heartfelt and relatable tale of loss. Players must complete puzzles in this platformer as they seek to uncover the truth behind Gris's pain. More than anything, Gris feels very therapeutic and will make even the strongest of players shed a tear. Stray is like if Cyberpunk met The Secret Life of Pets. Players get to step into the paws of a brave yet curious little orange cat who lives in a dystopian future whose main residents are robots. As a literal cat, players can't say more than meowing whenever they please, but the game is so well made that speaking isn't even necessary. The atmosphere and emotions are properly conveyed even when the only characters on screen are cats. And stray details, the cat exploring the crumbled world and assisting the robot citizens. It's a fairly simple game that comprises fun cat parkour and exploring with a robot companion. Even the action sequences are pretty mild when it comes to video games, but the gameplay and its story are absolutely delightful. There's a lot of heart to be found in Stray, and the distinct lack of human characters adds to the emotive storytelling. Respawn Entertainment's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was a thankful return to form after a string of gaming disappointments, and Jedi Survivor built on its predecessor's strengths. Cal Kestis and the rest continue the fight against the Empire in their own ways before coming back together to face a unified conflict stemming from the history of the High Republic. Survivor has become an intergalactic Souls game with its mechanics and tough battles. Star Wars Jedi Survivor brings theatrical production values and storytelling to gaming, with Cal and his companions being developed much deeper as investing characters. Punctuated by cathartic and versatile lightsaber combat, Jedi Survivor is an excellent tale from the galaxy far, far away on its own terms and connecting to the wider, expansive lore. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is one of the best games on the PS5 and perfect for fans of the space opera franchise. After the agonizing wait for 2020's Final Fantasy Remake finally ended, fans are now immersing themselves in this expanded world with Rebirth. Final Fantasy VII is easily the most well-known and beloved title in the franchise. Rebirth is set in the aftermath of the former's climactic and potentially universe-shifting events as Cloud and company travel across the land to stop Shinra's schemes and prevent Sephiroth from ushering in an end-times event. And Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was received with widespread critical acclaim, with praises mainly directed toward its grand-scale story and invigorating combat. Fleshing out the original PS1 classic into a trilogy of remakes, expanding on each key portion of its story was risky. However, it's a creative gamble that's paid off, with the larger world reimagined to a stunning degree and an even more polished combat system. For over 2 decades, a remake of Square Enix's Final Fantasy VII felt elusive, but 2020's remake was as warmly received. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is the complete package for PS5, adapting and expanding upon the Midgar portion of the story, following Cloud and Avalanche's quest to save the world from Shinra's destructive greed. The remake has allowed longtime fans to revisit their favorite story in a new light, while also bringing in droves of brand new fans to Final Fantasy. Instead of a 101 adaptation of the all-time PS1 classic, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Intergrade is the first in a trilogy of remakes, fleshing out the story and supporting characters of the original's early segments to intriguing effect. Now padded out with the DLC's Yuffie story, FFAI is a thrilling way to see these beloved characters reimagined graphically and with charming voice acting. Naughty Dog's original The Last of Us was a milestone title in the industry and the perfect coda for the PS3 generation, and the recent remake brings an already visual showstopper of a game more in line mechanically with Part 2. The Last of Us Part 1 retains the original story, seeing the unlikely surrogate pairing of Joel and Ellie through an unforgiving zombie-ridden US. The Last of Us features one of the greatest and most emotional stories seen on PlayStation consoles. Likes me, that terrifying skyscraper in the city of late 1970s New York. The argument can certainly be made that the PS4 remaster still holds up, not needing a top-to-bottom remake. But The Last of Us Part 1 is a welcome way to play through one of the greatest dramas told in the medium. The initially cynical duo have enthralling personal journeys and a touching dynamic, all being the foundation for the gut-wrenching Part 2. It's hard to find a better game than The Last of Us on Sony's consoles, and with the second season of the HBO adaptation set to release soon, it's a great time to dig into the gritty lives of Joel and Ellie. Guerrilla Games managed to go from the first-person shooting of Killzone to open-world action RPGs in the Horizon series seamlessly. Horizon Forbidden West was the long-awaited sequel to the 2017 title, centering around Aloy's quest to venture out to the American West Coast to find the source of a mysterious plague. The first game is incredible on its own, But Forbidden West delves further into the story to impressive effect, fleshing out its imaginative world, and the original game was widely praised for its creative spin on sci-fi RPGs, combining prehistorical aesthetics with sci-fi dystopia. Horizon Forbidden West expands on these aspects and the stories that come with it. It was a sequel worth the wait, as Aloy's story is fleshed out with breathtaking scope between the new villains, mystery, supporting cast, and the beautiful open-world sandbox they're set in. Fantastic narrative aside, Forbidden West also showcases thrilling and refreshing combat. Sure to please any PlayStation fan,